Welcome to Table Talk, where there's always room at the table. I am your host, Jonathan Harmon of the J. Harmon Home Team, and we can't wait to talk to these fine guests. Enjoy the show. And we're live. Hey, everybody, it's Jonathan Harmon with the J. Harmon Home Team, powered by Keller Williams. And I have got my friend Grant Hammond here. And we've got a little event this evening, 6 o'clock at Cedar Glade Brews. And we're going to be talking about 2022 real estate. What in the world happened? It was a very interesting year, to say the least, Grant. What?
Yeah, it was indeed.
Yeah. Started out a lot like it finished in 2021. Everybody was going crazy. There was, 20,000 offers on everything. People were handing blank contracts over and saying, just fill it in. We need the house. And then all of a sudden, stuff started to change. There was some rumbling about interest rates going up, and that seemed to get some people a little worked up. And then they did go up, and then people just kind of paused, and then they moved around a little bit, and there was a little bit more activity. I don't know. It was frenetic. I don't even know a better word for it.
Frenetic's the perfect word for it.
Yeah. So what happened? Why did all of that happen? If you recap that in a paragraph, what happened last year?
So what caused it obviously was the macro squeeze. So it was the Fed funds rate being lowered to zero as a result of the pandemic to restart the economy. Mortgage rates then dropped to as low as 2.5% on 30-year conforming product. And that drove the demand curve off the charts.
Mm-hmm.
And inventory simply could not keep up with demand.
Not even close.
Not even close. And we're not just talking about primary residences here. We're talking about investment properties as well. So not only was there a buyer for a primary residence, but that same buyer may also have bought one or two or three investment properties in state or out of state.
Mm-hmm.
So that drove a just massive avalanche of buying, in which we couldn't keep up with on the selling side. So prices squeezed. So it's not unlike a stock squeeze, right? When you've got a massive amount of buyers and a set amount of inventory, it squeezes. And that's what happened for the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. And then, so that's right. So that's what's been happening since really 2021. Why did it stop, I guess?
I don't know that stopped is the right word, but slowed down is
Mm-hmm.
probably a better word. The raising of the Fed funds rate, a 9-month bear market, stock market, and just an economic slowdown as prescribed by the Fed has led to higher mortgage rates, which peaked in the low 7%. And a low of 7% will really cut off demand on any type of real estate purchasing, primary residence or otherwise.
But why is that? Because historically, a 7% interest rate is not awful.
Yeah, I love this argument, right?
Right.
It's not if the real estate costs $50,000,
right,
like it did in the 80s, or $24,000 as my parents' home cost in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're talking about a market like Middle Tennessee, where prices have really shot up way above the national average over the last 5 years, then you're talking about a major impact. It's just math.
Sure. I mean, yeah, a starter home in Rutherford County, you're starting pretty much at 300, maybe 325. And that house would have been 140.
Right. Not long ago.
6 years ago.
Yeah. Not long ago.
Yeah.
And so when you compound that times a 7.25% interest rate, that monthly payment is out of reach for a lot of folks. And even if it's within reach, now you're nervous,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you're looking at your 401k or you're looking at your stock brokerage account, and you're down for the year, and everyone's down for the year.
A decent amount down.
Yeah. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
not just a little bit down, but you're down a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So all those leading financial indicators are making you nervous. So even if you could buy that house at 7.25%, you may wait 6 months, 12 months and see what happens.
So based on all of that, logic would dictate that prices should come down fairly substantially as well. Is that going to happen? Or is the bubble going to pop? We hear that all the time.
No, I love that because the bubble did pop, right? And during the Great Recession from 2007 to 2010, it did pop.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a completely different catalyst. The housing market actually led us into the recession, right? With
Mm-hmm.
all these crazy no-doc loans,
Fog and mirror.
Yeah, I love the
120%.
I know. I love the 60 Minutes story from 2011 where they follow this exotic dancer, I guess, in Miami, and she owns 7 investment properties and she's giving 6 of them back. I mean, that's what was happening. These just insane loans were happening. That hasn't happened since that happened. The Dodd-Frank Act really made it impossible to make these incredibly irresponsible loans, which were then packaged together and sold as financial securities. And then there's credit default swaps, which were bets against them. And that's what blew up the financial system. And that's what led to the housing crash. Then this time around, none of those factors exist. This time it is purely manipulating the mortgage interest rate that is causing the slowdown. And the slowdown is not going to last as long, or it's not going to be as deep as what people are saying. A few reasons for that. One is if you look at mortgage rates today, they're around 6%. So they've already come down 1.25%. And that's just over the past 2 months. And if you look at the 10-year treasury yield, it sits about 3.5% today. And if you look historically, 30-year mortgage rates are about 180 basis points higher than the 10-year treasury. That says we should be around 5.3% in a normal market. It's not a normal market because banks are still scared. Lenders are still scared. It's still expensive from banks to borrow from other banks. So it's not going to quite get to 180 yet, but it will get there at some point over the next 6 to 9 months as fear dissipates and markets calm down. So if you're thinking about buying that $350,000 house in Rutherford County at 7.25% 2 months ago, you punt for 6 months, and now you see it at 5.5% in April.
A lot more approachable.
Now you're thinking, you know what, that's not so bad, and you're more comfortable with the market. You're more understanding. Maybe your 401k is not dropping as much. It's still dropping a little bit, but that's slowed down a little bit. You see the light at the end of the tunnel. Then maybe you punt another 3 months, and now all of a sudden you're in August and rates are 5%. And now inventory is starting to actually dwindle a little bit, and you get a sense of urgency. And so I think that what you're going to see is a little mini squeeze later this year where mortgage rates are low, could be as low as in the high 4s, personal prediction. And I think inventory will be gobbled up over the summertime. So it could be a little micro squeeze.
So if you've got a house on the market right now and your sales have no wind in them, right?
Yeah.
What are you telling those people?
Yeah,
Because logic dictates that you drop the price until it sells.
Yeah, if you didn't sell it last year, right, and your neighbor sold for $500,000 and you waited for whatever reason and you put it on the market in January this year, you're not selling it for $500,000, most likely, if it's an identical home. And so you list it at $489 because you're going to be conservative and you're going to beat them to the punch and you're going to make sure the one that sells. Well, it doesn't sell. And you wonder, should I chase the market down? I think the answer is no. Unless you have an urgent sale need or urgent need to sell, I think I would withdraw and put it back on in the spring. It's really mortgage rates. It's really buyer psychology, which is, the buyer confidence level, which is extremely low right now. But all that stuff turns around slowly but surely over the next several months.
Gotcha. So if you do have that urgent need to sell right now, you just chase the market until you get to a number?
You got to price it right. And I feel like chasing the market means listing it really close to that last sale and you're down 10,000 every 30 days or so. I think that's dangerous because then you've got time on market working against you. You become stigmatized. Now you're that property that didn't sell. Instead, I think you undercut if you really need to sell and you come in 25, 30,000 less than that last home that sold.
It is days on market still stigmatizing though? Does everybody know?
It is for me.
Well, I know.
I look at it and I say, why has that house been on the market for 180 days? Because I think to myself, 6 months ago, the market was really pretty solid. Things were still moving pre-Thanksgiving. And I find it stigmatizing. I don't want it to be, but just it's ingrained in me somehow. Days on market is working against people.
So I don't know exactly how to frame this question. If we have, Rutherford County, fourth quarter of last year of 2022, they had, I think it was 35 or 36% fewer closings than fourth quarter of 2021. So forget the dollar amounts, but that
Sure.
actual number of closings.
Volume.
Yep. All accounts, it looks like January is going to be even lower than that, right? It's going to be even fewer. First quarter could be even, even fewer than that total, right?
Yeah.
As far as the percent.
It should be.
Right. So if that's the case, when the market comes back, those comp levels where they would, because the few transactions that did happen over those 6 months, they're going to sort of dictate some of that pricing. So we're going to come back in the spring and prices would be lower. Is that fairly accurate in order to get a reasonable comp? Or do we somehow convince an appraiser or whoever, well, don't look at the last 6 months, look at, the 6 months prior to that?
Yeah, appraisers are only going to look at the last 6 months. That's all they're mandated, allowed to look at. But theory sort of goes like this. So follow me on the ride here. That 7.25% rate was really achieved late November, early December. You're not going to buy, lock in that rate and close in January, right? Closings are 30 to 45 days after you sign the contract. So the closings are going to be a direct reflection of what happened with the rates 30 to 45 days ahead of that or behind that. And so if you're looking at early December as what were the interest rates, they were horrific and you really didn't want to buy at that point in time. You really shouldn't have. And so January closings are going to be less than December closings, and February closings are going to be less than January closings. But in March, you're going to see probably a 20 to 30% increase in closings. And that would be the people,
the activity that's right now,
the activity that's just starting to happen right now. Right. And that is a direct reflection of, as soon as you see that 5.99% mortgage rate, it's going to release a certain segment of the marketplace back into the wild to be home buyers again.
But will people see that 5.99 and come back in? Or, because this is the other thing that we saw last year, it seems like every major fluctuation up or down that happened last year, and we had, there were some ups, there were some downs, there were, back and forth with the interest rate. It seemed like every fluctuation of more than about, I don't even know, 3/4 of a point, people just kind of went, ooh, and they just waited to see, right? Okay, they came down 3/4 of a point. Let's, let it ride. Let's see if it'll go lower. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. We hit 6.5%. Was it into September, beginning of October? So since then, most people, 90 something percent of people have been waiting. So we have this pent up demand building right now. It's a shadow demand, if you will. And it's hard to quantify them. It's hard to see them. But they're the ones that, were renting in an apartment and decided to go ahead and extend for 3 months or 6 months. But you're starting to see the search traffic on the major aggregators starting to increase now, a lot more than what you saw over the past 30 days.
So 60 days even.
Or 60 days. So you're seeing all indications pointing towards this being very mortgage rate driven. And if you get to the point where mortgage rates reach, your monthly payment is equal to or less than what your rental payment is, most of those people are going to make that decision, let alone the tax benefits of having mortgage interest write-off. That math gets a little bit beyond most of the average buyer, but as long as your monthly mortgage payment is the same as or less than your monthly rental payment, most people make that jump.
Gotcha. All right. Well, let's see here. I have to open this back up. So, this has always been an interesting thing to me, and your brokerage is in Nashville proper, and you do a whole bunch of stuff with short-term rentals, and you do a whole bunch of stuff up there that we don't necessarily have as much in Rutherford County, but it's always been fascinating to me. A lot of realtors and just experts, right, air quotes on the experts, say that the Nashville MSA is somewhat insulated from what happens in other markets. Do you think that's true, first of all? And then if so, what does that mean as far as what's going on in other markets right now?
Yeah, it's kind of a loaded question, right? It feels good to say that we're insulated, like we have this warm blanket force field surrounding us that keeps us from any danger.
I think of it as a dome.
Yeah, but, a biodome. Remember how good that movie was?
Exactly.
Not very good. I don't think that, I think we're not insulated necessarily from macroeconomics, right? So the major trends driving the financial marketplaces affect everyone fairly equally. Where we do get a little insulated is in our business economy, in terms of having zero income tax, having zero hall tax now. That used to be 3%. It's come down to zero. So if you make a majority of your income off of dividends, then you're not paying tax on that any longer. We're still a very business friendly state. A lot of that, and my friends in Nashville hate me saying this, but a lot of that comes from the fact that we have a Republican led Senate and House for the state. And so we have a lot of business incentives. So constantly getting a good workflow of new buyers into the system simply from relocations of companies. Not all of them are, big Fortune 500,
Sure.
oracles.
Most of them aren't.
Yeah, most of them aren't. But what's amazing is the companies that follow them, because they did the research. Oracle spent the millions of dollars to research. Amazon spent the millions of dollars to research. And so a lot of companies piggyback off of that.
Mm-hmm.
So we are in better shape than, say, a state like Illinois that has an incredibly high business tax, personal tax rate, property tax rate, or Ohio, places like that. So I feel like the Rust Belt in the Western states and the Northeastern, to a certain extent, are not in as good of a position as the Sun Belt states. So if you look at the Arizona through Texas, through Tennessee, down to Florida, I think are going to do better during these times of high interest rates than the competing states that are still making it more difficult for businesses to expand or to be creative with what they do.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So I'm going to swing back to a kind of a question off of one of the questions that we just talked about. Prices, if demand shifts like it has, right, and it's slowed as far as just the sheer number of buyers, right, the volume, if you will. How and how do I formulate this again? You're saying pricing is going to adjust a little, right?
It has to.
It has to.
Yeah.
So how do you field the question if somebody says, let's say you helped them buy a house in March or April of 2022, did they overpay for that house? That's the oversimplified question.
So it's all relative, right? Because they likely secured a 4% mortgage. And so their monthly outlay for their $550,000 house is going to be the same monthly outlay that someone has now if they bought that same house with today's interest rates at $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
So while it feels like they overpaid and they're sitting at a loss,
because the house next door just sold at 500.
Because the house next door size full. Yeah, but you got to look at what loan did you secure? How much are you actually paying? How long are you going to plan on being there? It's never a loss until you sell, right? And so hopefully that person doesn't have to sell at that point, because there will be some value loss there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to be, I think it's going to be temporary this year. I think we've got a pretty decent outlook over the next 9 months. The next 3 months are going to be painful. And at some point here, I think that we'll get the official prognostication that we're in a recession.
Mm-hmm.
And that will scare the pants off of people.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the average citizen sort of feels the contracting of the economy one way or another, whether it be how much they spend on groceries, or how much they pay for eggs right now because of the avian flu. But they feel a squeeze somewhere. And so it shouldn't be a shock when they say it. What shocks most people is they don't realize we've been in a 9-month bear market for the stock exchange.
Right.
They forget that some stocks have lost 70% of value over that time. And recessions usually don't last more than 14 months or so. And so we've likely been in a recession, right? And so you can't predict a recession. You can only say when it started. And so it's always a backwards looking indicator. And so it's not really a great indicator. And so we've been in a recession for probably 4 or 5 or 6 months. Who knows how long they're going to say. So did a person overpay in March? Well, if we've been in a recession for 5 or 6 months, then they bought at the peak, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they secured financing that was way better than what's available today. So if you're going to own the home for 5 or 10 years, I'm not scared one darn bit for them. Or if you're going to own the home for 2 years, I'm not scared one bit. And you should own it for 2 years anyway, because when you sell it, you need,
tax
implications, right? So
Sure.
you shouldn't ever sell within that quickly. But if you need a HELOC, you're not going to get a HELOC on that house, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So it's relative, right? So you can't say if they necessarily overpaid. If they have to sell it today, it looks like they overpaid. If they live in it for the next 3 years, they underpaid.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at what the home will be worth and what they paid for it while they lived there.
Do you think that's true? Do you think we're going to just pick right back up whenever those rates hit that magic number and people kind of feel good about it? Sometime this year, we're going to pick right back up and we're going to see appreciation again. I guess, let me rephrase that. Do you think we'll see overall appreciation in house values this year?
Okay. Last year, we saw huge appreciation the first 6 months of the year,
Mm-hmm.
followed by depreciation.
Correct.
We are still in the depreciation cycle now. However, I feel like it will start to bottom at the end of Q2, beginning of Q3, and then we will see appreciation starting in Q3, going through Q4. Question is, will that appreciation outpace the depreciation of the beginning of the year?
Mm-hmm.
Certain markets here will, and certain markets won't.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking at the entire macro Middle Tennessee measurable market of these 8 surrounding counties, it's probably going to be a little bit less, but I have basically at a 0.
Pretty flat.
Yeah, I've got it at basically 0. You're going to lose 8% beginning of the year and gain 8% at the end of the year.
And so last year, 2022, we started out like gangbusters. It was just more of what we had in 2021. And I haven't seen the final numbers for December, but it looks like we're going to still have an overall appreciation in Rutherford County, at least somewhere in that 7 to 10% range is what it's tracking. I'm seeing 8 when I was looking at it in November, but we didn't finish December yet. You know what I mean? November was showing about 10. I figured we lose a little bit more in December, and there you go.
Yeah, it's interest rate driven, right? You're definitely going to lose some average sales value, and you're definitely going to lose volume as people continue to sit on the pause button. They won't sit on the pause button forever, though. I mean, we've got to remember at some point they will start buying again when it starts to make financial sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that typically happens in the 5s somewhere for most people.
Mm-hmm.
In the 4s, it makes sense for a lot of people. I mean, not just half the people, it makes sense for a lot of the people. So I expect to see quite a few buyers back over the summer and fall.
Gotcha. So what are you telling folks that are right now? Just pause, just sit and be still. And
I told people you should be writing contracts in February through May.
Okay.
If you really want to try to time the market, if that's the world you're trying to live in, you should be writing contracts in February through May, closing in April through July.
Because that'll be the bottom of where we are, and then we'll be ready to start coming back up.
That's it. Yeah. For those sub-markets that have a little less inventory, you need to get on it a little bit faster. For those like Spring Hill that have a lot more inventory, you can probably wait a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have this other, it's supply and demand that really that we're talking about here. And the supply was being added to very quickly over the last year. But now that banks are being squeezed, construction loans are extraordinarily expensive and hard to come by, even if the bank is loaning on a construction loan. So you're not going to see the inventory from the new construction side build like you did over the last 12 to 16 months. That should run itself out by the end of this year. And by next year, we're going to have another issue with supply. That plus the people who have a 30-year fixed mortgage at 2.5% or 3%. Are you really a seller if you don't have to be? I mean, I'm not. I did a refinance on my house in 2020 and got it down to 2.5%. And I haven't even thought for a second about putting it on the market. And I probably won't. And a lot of people are in that situation and won't. So we were going to have a little bit less supply available to us in 9 to 12 months than what we should have, just because, again, construction lending has all but stopped.
It's like we can't get the different pieces lined up. You know what I mean? You can't seem to get them timed out correctly.
There's no fluid marketplace, right? Like there's always one factor or another that's kind of dominating. I'd like to get back to a market where we're appreciating at 3 to 4% annually.
Predictable.
Supply is predictable. The amount of buyers are predictable, but I don't know that we've had that in a really long time.
A really long time. Maybe in 10, 11, when it kind of hit and started to bounce a little bit. Maybe.
I kind of felt like 13 through 15 felt predictable and felt good. And 17, 18, 19, I started to feel like we were undercooked a little bit for some reason. I started pulling back on my personal investments, thought, we're, things heading the wrong direction here. But, then we get a global pandemic, and then financial systems overcorrect as they do. And then we get 2 years of insanity, which makes now feel really slow. But if you go back and look at it historically over the last decade, we're back to our normal 2015, 16, 17 kind of numbers right now. Except for price, which is way up.
Right. And not really showing any indication that it's going to be coming down very soon.
Because most of us aren't sellers right now, unless you have to be.
All right. We're gonna end with an unpopular topic about this. So what are you telling, a lot of it. So I teach for MTAR, or I used to teach for MTAR, and I had full classes at their orientation. I had full classes every other month. There was 90 people in there that had just gotten their license for like the last 4 years. So the membership grew substantially over the last probably even 5 years there. What are you telling agents right now? Agents that are sitting across the table from you that are saying, man, I don't have any money.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough little slowdown, especially if they got their license 2 years ago and that 21, 22 market was what they thought life was going to be like. And they set up their personal finances based on what those years were like. And they put their time blocking and scheduling down as if it was always going to be like 21 and 22. Same thing happened to the agents in 2005 and 6 in this marketplace. I was a new agent then. I got licensed in 01. So .com bust. So I rode down for a couple of years, and then I had that 04 turnaround, and then the 5, 6 and beginning of 7 sort of euphoria, and bought a bunch of investment properties. And by 2009, I felt like I was working 14-hour days to make sure that a bank didn't try to take back one of my investment properties. And so the problem is real, because you get used to a market, and you spend and you time block and you schedule based on that's going to continue at that same rate forever, to infinity. And so some agents did overextend themselves. If they look back in hindsight, they should not have bought the new Land Rover, and gotten a 95% financing on it at 8.5% or some crazy number. And, maybe they didn't need to buy the oceanfront property in Carolina that, they thought was going to produce $200,000 of income a year, but now it's producing 150. And that's difficult. The only thing I can really tell those folks is you have to do the same thing I did in the Great Recession, which is increase the amount that you work and really focus and spend a lot of time building your client base. There's no other real advice to give other than that. Other than, I can give you the Dave Ramsey answer. Okay, sell your Land Rover, go buy a Honda Civic, sell the North Carolina property at a loss.
Deliver pizzas.
Yeah, deliver. I mean, I can get and go drive Uber Eats and all. That stuff's obvious, right? But it is a real problem if you just got licensed a couple of years ago and this is what you thought it was going to be like. Because this is really in the grand scheme of things, this is a pretty small little slowdown. I mean, this is nowhere near what the Great Recession was. In the Great Recession, we gave back 30 to 40% of value over a 2-year period of time. Here, I'd be surprised if we gave back 10%. I mean, I'd be shocked. But we're going to get it back pretty darn quickly because of the just pure interest rate driven marketplace that we live in now. If you look at the more of the macro numbers, jobs report for December came out. added 220,000 more jobs, right? So the Fed's trying to slow the economy down, but having a hard time doing that. Average salaries up 0.4%. Still haven't gotten the salaries to come down. The growth is slowing for it, but you're still having to pay that average employee more than you were the month before, the month before, the month before. Rents have started to come down and home prices have started to come down. And so those people are getting a little bit more comfortable. The longer you live in this new normal, the more comfortable you can get.
What is the right interest rate, mortgage interest rate?
I love it. So in 2000, we did the math in 06, 07, 08, 09. Once interest rates got over about 6.6, 6.7%, it shut off at that price level. So we went back and did some regenerative math analysis, and we came up with about 5.43% for the current price level. And that was the peak, not today, January the 8th, but that was at the peak pricing. So that was right before Thanksgiving, was when buying should shut off. And it really shut off in the higher fives, but the math said 5.4. I feel like we probably get back to 5.4 by spring break. It's coming back that quickly. Will the buyers come back that quickly? No, it's going to take time. You got to, the first few of them,
they're going to watch and make sure.
You got to wade into the pool. Okay, that guy was fine. Okay, now that family was fine. Okay, now I'll do it. So they're going to wade back in, but that says the summer is going to be a pretty crazy little summer here. So all in all, if you're going to try to summarize what's going to happen for these agents that were licensed 2 years ago, they're just going to have some momentary pain. They're going to be okay, right? Back to the fundamentals. Spend the next 6 months working on your sphere of influence and make yourself better. Take some classes, and go back to MTAR and take a lot more classes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, we did not hear from our friend Bryan Nale yet. Trent, I forgot to do that at the beginning. We just jumped right in. I was so excited to talk with Grant here. So Bryan Nale's over at Primis Mortgage. He is a big supporter of Spread the Positive and does a whole lot in our community as well. So let's hear from Bryan.
Hey, my name is Bryan Nale. I'm a mortgage loan officer with Primis Bank Mortgage, and I want to tell you that I absolutely love being a member of the Spread the Positive Network. It's such a great mission, and it helps bring so much positivity to our community. It's a true pleasure to be part of. There are a lot of ways to navigate financing a home, and in markets like this, having the advice of a trusted local professional is key to making sure you get the right advice for your specific circumstances. Whether you're interested in the purchase of a new home, second home, or have a need for a refinance, I'd love to earn your trust. If I can help you nail your mortgage, call me at 615-243-3976 or visit nailyourmortgage.com, and I'll be happy to talk with you.
Primis Mortgage is a subsidiary of Primis Bank, a member FDIC, equal housing opportunity. As always, all loans are subject to approval. Primis Mortgage, NMLS number 1894879.
I've always wanted to have a box of glow sticks here, and when we run Bryan's little bit there, hand it over and do the whole glow stick thing. I haven't done it yet, but maybe it'll happen before too long.
I want someone, every time I say something, I want that disclaimer voice to come on that says, Grant Hammond is not a member of FDIC. He does not have any real opinions. You just don't listen to Grant Hammond.
I may steal that. That's a good idea.
I want one of those.
Yeah, that's a good idea. All right, Grant, thank you so much. Hey, you still got time. It is just after 4:00, and at 6:00 here at Cedar Glade Brews, we're going to have a panel discussion. Grant's going to be on that panel along with Bryan that we just heard from, and another fellow named Ronnie Martin that is a commercial banker here in town. And so we're going to go through some of these same questions, some different questions, and just learn a little bit about, get a deeper understanding of what happened in 2022, what didn't happen in 2022 that everybody says happened, what's going to happen and what's not going to happen that everybody keeps saying is going to happen. We're going to go through some of that, dispel some myths, and speak some truth. And then hopefully identify some opportunities for 2023, because I think there are some.
They're out there.
Yeah. And so we'll talk about some of those as well. So we'll talk for probably an hour and 15, somewhere around there, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A from the audience. So it is a free event. If you'd like to come and join us, please do. 906 Ridgely Road. I know that's not evergreen content, Trent. I do apologize, but since we're live, I figured I'd go ahead and throw that pitch out there. I think that's it. Grant, do you have anything else you want to throw out?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to drinking some beer and talking tonight.
Me too. What do you know? That's awesome. All right, guys. Grant Hammond with Metropolitan Brokers out of Nashville. If you're looking for short-term rental stuff, especially, I mean, I've referred clients to Grant where they wanted short-term rental, and I probably could have done it, but I'd have fumbled my way through it, might have messed it up. It's possible, and I was like, nah.
You had it.
We're going with the right guy that does the best job for these kind of properties. And I sat back, let him do the work, and I took a check from him, and it was great. So anyway, thank you. By the way, my clients that you worked with, they love what they've got. Oh, so great. They're super excited about it. I guess that's it. Grant, thank you so much for being on here. And Trent, as always, thank you for doing what you do.
Yes, sir.
And if you guys have any real estate questions, you can reach out to me. If you have any mortgage questions, reach out to Brian. If you have short-term rental questions in Nashville, not in Rutherford County, reach out to Grant.
Nashville only.
That's it. Nashville only. All right. Thanks a bunch. Thanks for watching.